song.
Well, it seems like almost everyone has a list of dreams they'd like to fulfill before they die. Perhaps swimming with sharks, one of mine, or going on an African safari, also one of mine, or even jumping out of a plane, just like I did right there. But is it time to kick the bucket list? An op-ed in the Wall Street Journal argues that these lists serve as a shortcut and cheap substitutes for not being more adventurous earlier in life. So Dana, this author, Joe,
it goes to me because I'm so young.
Well, but can't you have a bucket list throughout your life? Like, I don't see that as like an end of life thing where you're like, I'm gonna die and now I have to check off these 10 things. Because
no, I think that becomes like a lot of pressure for them to think about all the things you want to do before you die, like the bucket list thing. I think it's like a kind of interesting concept. I think older people are doing it now because their path was to work really hard in their 20s, and they did things in this order, like school, marriage, job,
kids.
Kids, and then college, and then retirement, and they can do these things. And I think that it's kind of flipped now. Yeah. Like, younger people want to have these experiences now, and it's like they're delaying things until they get to have their gap years or things like that.
I think experiences are also more accessible now, Juan, with the things that we have available in the world, could be just because of the way that the economies have worked and improved.
Yeah, so I think this was a Joe Queenan piece in the Saturday Journal, and what struck me about it was that at some point he says, enough with bucket lists. I mean, let's move on. If you really want to do something like, that's different, go help somebody, go volunteer, go actually make a difference in the world. And I was struck by that. I thought that's a pretty powerful message.
But Greg, isn't this something that you would have written?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I pitched it, actually.
Absolutely. Joe Queenan is almost always right. And I could tell you as a writer and a journalist in men's magazines, the bucket list was never really a thing. No one ever made a list. This was a device created for freelance writers to write adventure and travel pieces for magazines like ARP or Men's Journal or Men's Life. It was just a way to make money. So they go, oh, let's do something on bucket list. Oh, that means I can go do Outward Bound in Colorado. I can go climb Everest. I have what I call the reverse bucket list, in which I'm trying to remove stupid behavior from my past.
It's like
I don't want to add things. I want to remove things.
But it's like the bucket has no bottom if you are one of those journalists.
Yes.
It's kind of smart.
Yeah. And it doesn't have a starting point, right, Jesse? I mean, I'm sure your bucket list started in the womb, and you can see all these amazing things happening in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of crazy, dangerous experiences growing up, and now I want to avoid them. I don't want to swim with sharks. I don't want to skydive. I don't want to run with the bulls. I don't want to do any of that. I want to sit on the beach with a drink and relax.
Exactly.
That's all I want to do.
But what about the accusation in this essay that if you have a bucket list of adventure, it's just basically a pathetic way of compensating for things you have not done earlier?
I think it's for boring people that want to not be boring. And then tell everybody all these crazy things they did.
I think that there are people out there who worked really, really hard. They put their kids through college. Maybe they helped their parents at their end of life, and now they have some time and they want to do some things while they're still healthy enough to do them, so they create this bucket list.
By the way, have you been to the beach this summer? You see all these older people with tattoos.
Oh, no. It is absolutely amazing. It is. I was in Hawaii. Everybody has tattoos.
Like
this is now the minority. You don't have tattoos.
So I think that is part of the bucket list. I think they're like, somebody hits 70, so you know what, I'm getting that.
I always wanted that bucket list.
Tattoos do not look good.
I didn't want to say it, but
yeah. Dad always wanted to have an earring and couldn't because of the place he worked, and so now he has one.
Are these fresh tattoos or are these older tattoos?
Well, I'm not getting into it.
No, you know what? You know what? A lot of tattoos are just bad tattoos. A lot of people get bad tattoos.
Yeah, like Hillary 2016.
So, Katie, let you have to answer the question. Why are you jumping out of airplanes?
Because it's fun. It's not just a bucket list thing, because why not? Life is too short. YOLO, that's the millennial.
Yeah, it was almost too short because she forgot to pull the wrist.
I almost had a short life, but it wasn't my job. It was only a suggestion. One more thing is up next.
OMT, JW.
All right, Greg's been on a new diet, and he looks great. He's really slimmed down and trimmed it up. But he had a moment of weakness where we caught him with his proverbial hand in the cookie jar. Here he is right here. He climbed on top of a little countertop. There he is, reaching in for a donut, but was caught red-handed and had to put it back. Sorry, Greg. There it is.
Oh.
Wow, that's your one more thing?
That is my one more thing. It's from all the hair jokes. I had to get him back.
It was nice.
That Greg was a chubby little guy.
Eating donuts all day.
All right, you've heard about people popping out of cakes at bachelor parties, but how about a big surprise at the wedding? Johnny Campbell, an Alabama football fan, got married to Becca Campbell, who's a Louisiana State football fan. So she gave him a cake with an Alabama A on top during the wedding reception. But watch what happens when he cuts into it. Right, it was purple and gold inside, the colors of LSU. I think my man lost his appetite.
I like that.
Got him.
Good.
That's crazy stuff. All right. It's time for something new. Greg's foreign policy with animals. So I asked a dog and some bunnies if they could reenact President Obama's foreign policy. So let's check it out here. It's just there he is with a bunch of carrots feeding these rabbits.
Oh,
We never, it took a while, but they were like, oh, they're actually.
Can I get in on that?
Actually,
I'm taking the whole
those aren't rabbits. They're rabbits and they're pigs. There's a pig in there.
Dog is very patient.
Yeah, but you know what? He's just giving away the carrots. You don't see a stick anywhere. No sticks anywhere, Dana. That's the foreign policy of President Obama. All right.
Trained to feed them carrots?
Yeah, is that beautiful, Dana?
Okay, I'm going to promote Greg's book today.
Oh,
it's
yay.
called The Gutfeld Monologues, and it comes out tomorrow.
Ooh.
And I interviewed him today on the Fox News Rundown podcast. It's going to air tomorrow morning, so you should subscribe to that on anywhere you can, like iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Play. You just go to foxnewsrundown.com. You can download it. It was pretty fun to interview him.
It was a good part. You did a good interview.
Oh, thank you.
You did a good interview. No, she did. I didn't know what to expect. Because
Thank you.
It was,
look, and I've had a chance to read through it. It's an excellent book. If you've been a fan of The Five, if you've watched his monologues, you're going to really love it. It's a little bit of a trip down memory lane, but he goes back and he critiques himself. And
Exactly.
he's honest about it.
Wait.
He's pretty funny about it. And I encourage everyone to buy it.
Which one was your favorite monologue?
I love all the ones. Oh, gosh, I have a few. I told him in the interview that I'm his personal laugh track. But I really do love it when you come up with, like, the peanut helmet thing.
Yeah, yes, the peanut helmet.
All the little jokes for Dana are pretty fun.
Yeah, it's
so
really
it's-
good.
But I think, by the way, there's big credit to be given to Greg for the idea that he would go back over time and say, maybe this was a little off.
Yeah,
I would never do that.
No, I had no
Never
choice.
read a book like this.
I thought you said that about the haircut.
I had no choice.
Okay.
All right, Katie, what you
All
got?
right, mine's really sad and a tragedy, but also hilarious. Who doesn't love a scoop of guacamole or spicy salsa on a crisp tortilla chip?
Love it.
Lots of people. But these chips that these people are not eating, these other chips, brought the heat because firefighters were called to a Texas tortilla chip factory, not once, but twice in 3 days after boxes of chips spontaneously combusted.
Whoa.
Both fires started when the tortilla chip factory was testing a new way to handle chip waste. Who throws tortilla chips away in the
chip
first
waste,
place?
what's that?
The Austin Fire Department said they were distressed to be called out to a tortilla chip warehouse twice to battle the fire, writing in a Facebook post, "Tortilla chips are big business around these parts. We take them very seriously as they are responsible for holding all manner of very important things like queso, salsa, nachos, and various other sun-dry items that are critical to a Texan's everyday life and well-being." So they were very sad that these chips spontaneously combusted, and I'm sure there were lots of Austin residents who were also very sad. But after the two fires, the firefighters had no choice but to drown out the rest of the chips in the warehouse to make sure the risk was completely taken away. So there might be a chip shortage in Texas, which is not good.
All right.
Faster.
Well, maybe they could get some from somewhere else.
There you go.
Trade.
Call
Excellent.
Dallas.
All right. All right. He's bringing us the news, and he's willing to share. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Brett Baer. Special reports up next. Hey, Brett.
You're going to run out of them. Thanks, Greg.
He already has. I'm trying.
This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Brett Baer in Washington. Coming up in a few minutes, my exclusive interview with Nicaraguan revolutionary turned president Daniel Ortega about the growing unrest in that Central American country. You do not want to miss that from Managua. First up tonight, though, President Trump is considering revoking the security clearances of some of his biggest critics. The list includes some of the top intelligence, law enforcement, and national security officials of the last decade. Let's find out why these individuals and why now. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is here tonight. Good evening, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Brett, and good evening. The announcement from the White House podium this afternoon, mostly impacting senior intelligence and law enforcement officials from the Obama administration, stunned reporters.
Not only is the president looking to take away Brennan's security clearance, he's also looking into the clearances of Comey, Clapper, Hayden, Rice, and McCabe.
That's former CIA Director John Brennan, former FBI Director James Comey, former top spy Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, former CIA Director Michael Hayden, former National Security Advisor Susan Rice, as well as former Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe.
The president is exploring the mechanisms to remove security clearance because they've politicized and in some cases monetized their public service and security clearances.
The issue came up at the briefing after Republican Senator Rand Paul tweeted that he would ask President Trump to pull Brennan's clearance. After the Helsinki summit, Brennan tweeted that the president's actions were treacherous.
Making baseless accusations of improper contact with Russia or being influenced by Russia against the president is extremely inappropriate, and the fact that people with security clearances are making these baseless charges provides inappropriate legitimacy to accusations with zero evidence.
In a tweet, former CIA Director Michael Hayden seemed to brush off the threat, writing, "I don't go back for classified briefings. Won't have any effect on what I say or write." Clapper said, "It's kind of a sad commentary for political reasons." A friend of Comey's asked the former FBI director whether he even has a security clearance to revoke, and Comey replied, "No." A spokeswoman for McCabe, who was fired earlier this year, said her client's clearance was already deactivated.
This strikes me as a way of lashing out at the president's critics. But, that's part of the job is to defend your positions. But attacking them this way seemed to me to set a pretty dangerous precedent.
The president also weighed in on a weekend document dump from the FBI and Justice Department. Though heavily redacted, the 412 pages released late Saturday indicate that the unverified dossier financed by the DNC and Clinton campaign helped secure the October 2016 surveillance warrant for Trump campaign aide Carter Page. On Twitter, the president tied in the Robert Mueller special counsel Russia probe and the National Security Court known as FISA, characterizing the opposition research as the fake dirty dossier that was knowingly and falsely submitted to the FISA, which was responsible for starting the totally conflicted and discredited Mueller witch hunt.
According to this letter obtained by Fox News, House Republicans on the Intelligence Committee want the president to immediately declassify two key sections because they believe the FBI's use of the dossier violates strict internal rules. Sanders said today the president has chosen to remain uninvolved and wants the Justice Department to be fully transparent. Brett.
Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
President Trump is threatening Iran with historic consequences. The president and the Iranian leader, Hassan Rouhani, are exchanging hostilities verbally about the possibility of exchanging hostilities of a more destructive nature. The spat is an outgrowth of the U.S. withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal negotiated by then President Obama. Correspondent Jillian Turner has the blow-by-blow.
If anybody is inciting anything, look no further than to Iran.
What seemed like a battle has now exploded into a full-on war of words between Washington and Tehran. Yesterday, Iranian President Rouhani issued words of warning to the U.S. that, quote, "War with Iran is the mother of all wars."
Mr. Trump, don't play with the lion's tail. This would only lead to regret. You will forever regret it.
His comments earned an all-caps presidential tweet. "Never ever threaten the United States again or you will suffer consequences the likes of which few throughout history have ever suffered before. We are no longer a country that will stand for your demented words of violence and death. Be cautious." And just a short while ago, Iran's foreign minister jumped into the fray with a tweet of his own. "Color us unimpressed. We've been around for millennia and seen fall of empires, including our own, which lasted more than the life of some countries. Be cautious." A few hours after President Rouhani's comments yesterday, Secretary Pompeo delivered a highly anticipated speech speech at the Reagan Library. He upped the ante by accusing Iran's government of sponsoring terrorism around the world and had this message for the Iranian people.
This tells you everything you need to know about the regime. At the same time, they're trying to convince Europe to stay in the nuclear deal. They're covertly plotting terrorist attacks in the heart of Europe.
He also focused on corruption, accusing Iran's supreme leader, the head of state and religion, of operating a $95 billion hedge fund. He also took care during his remarks to distinguish between America's dislike of the Iranian government and its respect and goodwill towards the Iranian people.
Voiced from Saudi Arabia, Ali, here.
At the Aspen Security Forum last week, a rep from the Arabia Foundation said the Trump team's tough rhetoric is proving to be more effective than the Obama administration's diplomacy.
In the region, it was seen as an emboldened Iran daring to humiliate the United States by taking its troops captive. The impression today is that the Iranians wouldn't dare to pull such a stunt on America.
All this as the August 6th deadline for the U.S. to impose the so-called snapback sanctions on Iran draws closer. In just 2 weeks, the Trump administration also plans to start penalizing countries, including close U.S. allies who continue to do business with the regime. Now, the hottest question in Washington is whether this war of words will result in a Trump-Rouhani summit in the near future, Brett.
That has been the blueprint. Jillian, thank you. Breaking news from Toronto now. Police have just identified the suspect in yesterday's fatal shooting. They say Faisal Hussein of Toronto fired a handgun into restaurants and cafes downtown. 2 people were killed, 13 wounded. Hussein was killed by police. Authorities not talking about it yet, but not ruling out terrorism. The attack comes 3 months after the driver of a van plowed into pedestrians on a Toronto sidewalk, killing 10 people. President Trump is keeping up the pressure on the rest of the world over trade policy. However, many Americans are feeling the pressure as well. Correspondent Kevin Corke is at the White House with details tonight.
America never waves the white flag. We only wave the red, white, and blue flag. The era of economic surrender for the United States is over.
Even as President Trump welcomed to the White House a shining array of U.S. manufacturers, business owners, and ag producers for the annual Made in America showcase, economic storm clouds were brewing over the impact of his aggressive trade and tariff policies that some fear could limit the ability for many of those same manufacturers to sell their wares abroad. In recent weeks, Mr. Trump has slapped billions of dollars in tariffs on China and the EU, citing national security concerns, unfair trade practices, and the need for reciprocal market access. But then the EU retaliated, hitting the U.S. with higher tariffs on motorcycles, jeans, and bourbon. Beijing responded, targeting U.S. ag products, including corn, pork, and poultry.
I'll remind you that tariffs really are consumer taxes.
But administration officials insist any short-term discomfort will be far outweighed by increased fairness for American workers. In fact, the U.S. Census Bureau reported that the U.S. goods and services deficit was $43 billion in May. That's actually down $3 billion from April.
These trade issues didn't occur overnight. President Trump is determined to have free and fair and more balanced trade, and we just want to make sure American companies and American workers are treated fairly. And yes, I do see a light at the end of the tunnel.
The trade back and forth comes as the administration is touting a robust jobs outlook, with more than 3.2 million new jobs created since the president took office and near record low unemployment.
All this happening in a week that we expect to see the president of the European Commission come here to the White House. That's planned for Wednesday, no doubt hoping to tamp down that budding trade war, Brett.
Live on the North Lawn, Kevin Corke. Thanks, Kevin. China's foreign ministry says threats and intimidation on trade will never work. Today's comments come after the U.S. Treasury Secretary Friday raised the prospect of designating China as a currency manipulator. America's trade battle with China, which includes significant new tariffs on both sides, is hitting many U.S. industries. President Trump will talk to farmers in Iowa later this week. Tonight, we look at how trade policy is affecting lobstermen in Maine, who are definitely feeling the pinch. Here's correspondent Molly Line.
Maine's lobster industry, a staple of the state's economy, is becoming a casualty in the burgeoning trade war between the U.S. and China.
The hard part is that it was an up-and-coming market.
China's appetite for American seafood is voracious. The country consumed a record nearly 18 million pounds of lobster alone last year, roughly 20% of the American lobster industry's $648 million export total. But hit with new U.S. tariffs, Beijing struck back, slapping an additional 25% levy on U.S. lobster. The changes threaten profits for dealers like Michael Marceau.
50% of what we do here at the Lobster Company used to go to mainland China. Since July 6th, we've sent none.
His company employs 20 people. Worker hours have been cut, and Marceau hopes to avoid layoffs.
It doesn't affect just my crew. It affects the lobster catchers, their crews, the trap makers, the guys that do rope, the guys that do buoys.
Advocates fear lost access to the Chinese market will hit the whole industry, from wholesalers to harvesters.
It's a lot about rural jobs for us. It does have a huge impact to our rural communities, our islands, and our coastal towns.
Michael Floyd has been pulling lobsters from the sea since childhood.
Right now, the price is pretty stable. But the season has just barely started, too. Once the lobsters really arrive in mid-coast, in the whole state, we don't know how it'll go.
He's weathered many storms in his decades-long career and wonders what this latest one will mean.
It's the old adage, we're not going to starve, but I don't know if we're going to get rich either.
The hope here is that the new Chinese tariffs go away and fast before buyers in China establish new connections with lobster dealers in other countries, like Canada, where the tariff stands at just 7%. The fear is that once the business is gone, it won't come back. Brett?
Molly, thank you. Up next, we talk exclusively with Nicaragua's President Daniel Ortega about calls from within his country for him to step down. First, what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 2 in St. Louis says the tourist boat that sank in the southern Missouri last week, killing 17 people, is brought back to the surface. The duck boat went down in churning waves near the tourist town of Branson. The victims included 9 people from the same family. The National Transportation Safety Board and the U.S. Coast Guard are investigating what exactly caused the boat to sink. Fox 5 in New York, as the New York Daily News says, it will cut half of its newsroom staff. The owners say the paper will focus more on digital news. The Daily News was sold to the owner of the Chicago Tribune last year for $1. The newspaper has been a key fixture in New York City for the last century. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is urging the owners to reconsider. And this is a live look at Detroit from our affiliate Fox 2. One of the big stories there tonight, a real-life Rosie the Riveter hits a milestone. Rosario Martinico celebrated her 108th birthday Sunday in Rochester Hills. In World War II, she stepped in with other women to help the war effort. She served her country as one of the original Rosie the Riveters, working on B-17 bombers for 6 months. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.